with the Eagles playing on Thursday and it being somewhat of a special day called Thanksgiving, if you're not aware.
I am aware.
He's going to join us now and talk some birds with us, and also had a really interesting story that came from one of his tweets today, Josh. So thanks for jumping on the Tuesday show, changing your schedule around for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
You got it. And, well, obviously, that tweet you sent out with Lane Johnson earlier about the Eagles not having a home field advantage has struck some nerves to the Eagles fans out there. And, of course, Johnson quickly apologized for those comments. But when you got this, him saying this, did you sense that this guy was in a moment where he was just annoyed? Is this his true feelings? What do you make of these comments from Lane Johnson? What does it say about the state of this team right now?
Well, when he said it, my sense was just that it was very genuine, because it's not like, he was going on like a rant or anything, or he was, angry. He was his normal laid-back self. He was just kind of stating things, how he views them. And that's, one thing about Lane. That's why you'll always see this hordes of media reporters around him, because Lane's one of the few guys on the team that will just kind of tell things as he sees it. And obviously that wasn't a popular opinion with the Eagles fans, but, it was something that was certainly, it wasn't, heat of the moment right after a crushing loss or anything like that. It was just after, practice, having a casual conversation. And then he said that, and I was pretty surprised when he did.
So, does it kind of, in your opinion, reflect that, he's kind of fed up with the season, fed up with the team, or fed up with the fans' treatment of the team? What do you said he sounded genuine, so in those comments being genuine, because I would agree, if he's making them kind of in the way that he did, it seems like that's what's on his mind. What does that say about what he thinks about this team moving forward?
Well, I don't think it necessarily has a lot to do with this team specifically. I think in general, it's just kind of how he views how fans can be, and not necessarily just Eagles fans, but kind of all sports fans, because that was one thing. He also talked about how fans can kind of just say whatever they want on Twitter and social media without any repercussions. So he was really giving his views. Obviously he specifically stated Eagles fans and how the Eagles don't have a home field advantage when they're doing like that. But I think it's also just an example he was using to give kind of his broad thoughts on sports fans in general being kind of quick to turn on the team. And, the one thing that I thought was interesting was, people were obviously, frustrated. Eagles fans were upset that he said that. But, to me, he wasn't necessarily placing blame on the Eagles fans as much as he was just stating this is something that happened.
Yeah, Josh, and he might have set the record for quickest apology afterwards, kind of knowing he put his foot in it a little bit. But you mentioned the whole idea of home field advantage, and I was talking to the guys about the Packers, and really Lambeau Field didn't exist, the home field advantage between Bart Starr and Brett Favre. So isn't home field advantage really about having a good football team? Foxborough's tough to win in because the Patriots are good. Seattle was tough to win in because the Seahawks were good. Isn't that what it comes down to?
Yeah, I completely agree. Home field advantage really is a product of what you see on the field. The reason the Eagles didn't have a home field advantage on Sunday was because they gave up 45 points, and Jameis Winston threw, 4 touchdown passes in the first half? It doesn't matter if you're in Seattle or New England or Philadelphia. When the team puts that kind of poor performance out in the field, it doesn't really matter who's in the stands, because what do fans have to cheer about or to be happy about when you play that poorly?
And let's shift to that. You mentioned that defense. You do a good job with the All-22. What broke down to where this has been the strength of this team throughout the season for the most part, and all of a sudden Jameis Winston shows up, Doug Martin shows up, and the Eagles can't do anything to stop it? What was the biggest issue on Sunday?
The thing that really shocked me was that pretty much every player on the defense that you talked to said the same thing. We weren't prepared for what they were doing. And now that was something that obviously you spend the whole week preparing for the team, for the offense, what they're going to do. how are you not prepared for what they bring out? Some guys mentioned that they ran a lot of routes that they haven't shown on film. They did a lot of things that they haven't shown before. But my point is, while that certainly may be true, and they showed new things, this is the only team the Buccaneers have done this against. It's not like the Buccaneers have this, past during the season where they just lit up every team they played. So while they may be a team that does a great job of, implementing new wrinkles every week, the Eagles handled it the worst, and the in-game adjustments, they weren't there. And the ones that were there obviously didn't work.
Josh Paunil's with us, PhillyMag.com, Birds 24/7. Check out the Eagles and the Lions this week. A lot of the coverage leading up to this game, they're still talking about, it was an embarrassing loss. Do you get the sense, Josh, that they have moved on from this game? I mean, because it seems like it's still lingering around, and they play in 2 days.
Yeah, I think the players are very eager to move on. They really want to put this game behind them. Especially today, there weren't a ton of guys in the locker room. The guys who were in the locker room, they didn't really want to talk about Sunday. They said, I'm just focused on the game Thursday. I think the players are actually happy. Obviously there's a positives and drawbacks to having a game on Thursday, but I think they're happy that the game is on Thursday because they can just kind of get this game out of their mind quicker. They can move on, and it's not something they really have to think about because, once today hit, you're consumed in the Detroit Lions film. You're consumed in what you're going to do on Thursday. So they just really aren't able to think about the game much on Sunday. Trying to move on is hard to do sometimes, specifically when you have things like an anonymous player calling out DeMarco Murray, and that kind of lingers around. It's hard to move on when you have Lane Johnson referencing back to, well, we don't have home field advantage because we're getting booed, the place is empty. And I thought his apology was – he said, look, we need to earn home field advantage. The link can rock. We need to make that happen. But it seems that's why I asked, because it seems like there is some sense that – whether or not they're referencing specifically last week, that some of these guys' minds are on that this season is kind of spiraling out of control. Yeah, and my kind of the thought that's really been on my mind this week is that all the players on Sunday, the sentiment was certainly sincere and shared amongst the players that it was an embarrassing loss and they want to right the ship. But my point is, well, why should we believe you that you're going to turn things around when you had an embarrassing loss in Week 2 against Dallas? You had a game last week against Miami that everyone on the team said should have won. So although I certainly believe them that they're embarrassed, they've been embarrassed before this season and haven't turned things around. So there's really no reason to believe that, okay, we're going to see a whole new team on Thursday or a whole new team going forward to make a playoff push.
Josh, you had written at Philly Mag that you've remained steadfast that this is not a good team, but if they could have played to their potential, that maybe they could have won the division. What is this team at its full potential now? When you watch 10 games and you watch the All-22 and you break down their flaws, when this team plays to their potential, because I don't know that we've seen them play to their potential. If they have, then they're real bad. But to you, what is this team at its potential?
Well, at its potential, I think it's what we saw before the season. It's a 10-6 or 11-5 team that can win a playoff. You have Sam Bradford, playing at a level that we thought he could. But obviously, when you're 11 weeks into the season, potential doesn't really matter that much anymore. It's about production. And the big motto the last few weeks has been around the locker room, we are what our record says we are. And the Eagles' record says they aren't a good team. So, I think there still is potential for them to be better, but it doesn't really matter because they're not showing it, and they're not showing any reason to think it's coming because, how much improvement have you really seen from Week 1?
I think we just lost Josh there, so we'll try to get him back on there because, as he said, how much improvement have you seen since Week 1, John? Not much. I don't know that you've taken any steps forward.
I think you've seen incremental improvement at the quarterback position. As I said, before he went down with the injury, I think Sam Bradford played his best games, but then the injury comes and you have that impact. And we have Josh back from Birds 24/7, PhillyMag.com. Josh, I wanted to kind of shift gears and look forward at Detroit, and it starts with the quarterback position. Do you get a sense that because of the short week, it is going to be Sanchez, and Chip Kelly's just going for the competitive advantage, trying to hold out as long as possible?
Well, yeah, that's what Lane Johnson also said today. The other big news that he had was that he expects Mark Sanchez to be the starter on Thursday. Sam Bradford was limited in practice today, so when you have a guy who hasn't fully practiced either day this week, coming off not just the concussion but the separated shoulder, it definitely seems that Mark Sanchez will be the starting quarterback on Thursday. But I imagine Chip is getting anxious to get Bradford back in after the performance that Sanchez had on Sunday.
When you look at the uneven performance of this offense from week to week, and obviously you could look at every position and each has contributed at times to the less than stellar play. But if you had to pick up one part of this offense that has been the biggest issue to you, what would that be?
Well, I think it has to go probably to quarterback play. I mean, the offensive line obviously had their struggles, particularly early in the season, with running the ball. But when you have a quarterback, I mean, you've seen what just the difference a good quarterback can make, whether it's Tony Romo coming back or, when Peyton Manning was out and missed the season with the Colts before, he left. I mean, the quarterback just makes such a big difference. And although Sam Bradford, I was actually impressed by the progress that he made the last couple of games. And right before his injury, he was playing better, but he wasn't playing at a consistently high level. And although the receivers had their drops, the running backs could have done a better job. At the end of the day, it's the quarterback who has the most responsibility and the biggest part of whether the team is successful or not.
Josh, again, you watch the All-22. I'm interested to get your take. You see a guy in Murray who just doesn't fit? Do you see a guy in Murray who's lost a step? He had a lot of carries. There were some people who were concerned that he had some tread on the tire and that as he lost a step, is he slow? When you watch DeMarco Murray, what do you make of him in this offense? Is it not a fit or lost a step or a combination? Give me your thoughts on what you see on tape from him.
Well, the biggest thing that I've seen, especially recently, is he doesn't get a whole lot of yards after contact, and that's one area that I think Ryan Matthews is the guy that gets you the yards after the contact. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you get him, even if you get him behind the line of scrimmage, he'll fight for those few yards. And DeMarco Murray obviously fights, but the production just isn't there after contact. And I mean, he doesn't. There have been a few plays this year where you see him, whether it's out on the edge or trying to break free, where he just doesn't have that extra gear or extra step. And now maybe Pat Shurmur inadvertently explained that one. I think it was around the bye or after the bye. He said how Murray was much healthier. So, maybe it's an injury or something that has slowed him down, but he hasn't had that kind of burst that you expect to see once he hits the open field. But then also the yards after contact hasn't been what you'd expect either.
And it could be those 492 touches from last year in Dallas. But Josh, I want to shift towards the wide receiver position specifically. And obviously, Chip early in the season really, really leaned heavily on 11 personnel. And that's his preference, to have 3 wide receivers on the field for most of the time. And this group is just not good enough. Is it just the fact that these guys aren't ready to play, specifically the younger receivers, Nelson Aguilar and Josh Huff, or is it something else that we're missing that you see in the All-22?
Well, I think a big thing is that they run the ball better out of the 12 personnel. I mean, that was something that they certainly struggled with early on. And then when they had that, the 4-game stretch where they rushed for more than 150 rushing yards for 4 consecutive games, they relied more heavily on that 12 personnel where you have both tight ends, Zach Ertz and Brent Selleck in the game. So when you have an offensive line that's not playing well, and you can get, a tight end instead of a receiver as your extra blocker, that's going to help you. So I think it's partially due to the fact that they run the ball better out of 12 personnel. But then also, especially with Nelson Aguilar hurt, who are you going to have outside? Miles Austin, Riley Cooper? Those aren't guys that inspire a whole lot of confidence in terms of just producing. And that's something where, I think it was Chip Kelly said yesterday where he was talking about, Josh Huff didn't get a whole lot of snaps after he had that touchdown because he was rotating with Aguilar. Well, why isn't he rotating with Cooper or Austin instead? He only gets 17 snaps. You want a guy that, if you're going to check it down as much as the Eagles have been, you want a guy who can get you those yards after the catch. And Huff obviously showed he can do that on his touchdown. So I certainly think it's fair to question how much Josh Huff has been playing and the number of snaps that Miles Austin and Riley Cooper have been getting instead of Huff, and then Nelson Aguilar as Aguilar has come back from his injury.
Yeah, and the production has just been putrid from the wide receiver position. But, Josh, early in that game, it seemed like Sanchez, they got him into a situation where they threw the ball 2 times, bang, bang, right in a row to Aguilar. Then they ran the ball pretty well. Then Sanchez takes off. He really displayed a couple of different angles of the offense in that first drive, but it seemed like they never went back to letting, a lot of this is get the ball out of your hands and let the guys make plays. We understand they don't have great playmakers, but early on, hey, Aguilar, boom, here you go. Huff, here you go. He makes a nice guy miss. Sproles with the touchdown run. They got the screen pass set up, and Sproles makes something happen. It seemed like they got away from that, and the one play that just drives me insane is you got a $40 million running back who led the league in rushing, and you throw 5 swing passes to that guy out of the backfield. It just seems that the offense just has no rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah, and that was another thing that Chip was really grilled about yesterday in his media session was why would you, after the success that you had in your first drive, why was that not there the rest of the game? And, he was talking about, the cover 2 defense prevented you from throwing to the outside and to throw it deep. But the Eagles even struggle to hit those intermediate passes. And even when you go up against a defense like that, it should be easier to run the ball. Although they did have some success running. I think they averaged 5 yards per carry. But even those intermediate throws and just the rhythm, that's something that you didn't really see out of Mark Sanchez was even when he was completing passes, after that first drive, you didn't see him get into a rhythm where he just seemed very, confident and comfortable in what he was doing. And I think those 3 interceptions was a product of him just not being able to get into a rhythm with his receivers.
All right, Josh, always good stuff. Thanks for jumping on a couple days early here.